Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a Slash Pick. Oh, just in time for spooky season. We're talking about none other than one of the most iconic slasher films of all time, Halloween. I'm your host, DJ Wooldridge. With me, as always, is Adam Havoc. Hey, man.
What's up?
How excited are you that we got here? We're here, baby.
I rearranged my whole shelf for this conversation.
Oh my God. I think this is like patient zero for what might have been the seed for this show in a couple ways. Because my introduction to knowing Adam was a big slasher fan, was his love for the Halloween movies. But not only that, I realized rewatching this, it's like, oh, that's right. I have a pet theory about this movie that I think was the germ of an idea of like, I want to talk about these movies more. I want to talk about slasher movies more. So we're talking about 1978's Halloween. Little introduction, because this is going to be the first episode of this show. This is our technically our third episode that's going live. But this is our first episode on my personal channel. We're moving stuff like Slash Pick over to my personal channel. This was on my other channel, OSA, Only Stupid Answers. But this stuff is kind of a better fit for the stuff I'm doing on my personal channel, so we're moving it over here. You'll still be able to see our first two episodes, which were Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They'll be on the same playlist, so please check those out. We also... So schedule's been a little wonky because I have a newborn. Adam and I filmed an episode on Black Christmas because we're doing these movies chronologically, and that takes place that was released in the same year as Texas Chainsaw. However, due to my hiatus of being a new dad, it didn't get posted, so we're going to hold on to that until Christmas, which is fine, except that there is a little bit of historical overlap between that movie and this movie. And so Adam will be like, hey, you remember when we talked about how Black Christmas might have inspired Halloween? And you'll be like, wait, when did they talk about that? We talked about it on the Black Christmas episode, which you'll be able to check out around Christmas time. So, you know, little time travel shenanigans.
That's fine.
It's fine. Listen, we love y'all. You love us. We're happy you're here. You're happy. You're happy that we're happy.
Now
we're
you
all
know
happy.
you're getting an episode during Christmas time, so good for you.
Good for you. And I got to say, you should look forward to it because Black Christmas is pretty good. It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, it was tight. I liked it quite a bit.
Okay, but here's the movie we're talking about today. We're talking about 1978's Halloween. We're kind of in a 1978 era because if you guys don't know, I'm starting a new show called Krypton Academy with Sal Crivelli, and we're going through the Superman movies leading up to James Gunn's Superman movie. And the first Christopher Reeve Superman film was also released in 1978. Good year
Literally
for movies.
2 months after this, which is so weird.
Crazy. Good year for movies. So the synopsis is 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night in 1963, Michael Meyers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois to kill again. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 96% with an audience score of 89%. Critics say scary, suspenseful, and viscerally thrilling. Halloween set the standard for modern horror films, and it's directed by John Carpenter. And if you're new to this channel or the OSA umbrella, we're big fans of Mr. John Carpenter in this house.
Oh, yeah.
And it was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, and of course stars Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie and Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. And boy, howdy, I cannot wait to talk about Dr. Loomis. I cannot wait to talk about
Donald
Loomis.
Pleasance is incredible.
Okay, but before we get into that, Adam, what was your introduction to Halloween?
Oh, my God. How much time do we have?
Well, as much as you want, man.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, so the funny thing is about Halloween, I don't exactly remember the first time I saw or knew anything about the movie Halloween. Because my exact first memory, the two first memories that I remember about Halloween is and it still does to this day. It plays on AMC's Fright Night all throughout October. So you can put on AMC channel and one of the four Halloween movies is probably playing. But I think that's where I first saw glimpses of the film was on AMC channel back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how I got to the conversation, but I used to go to a before school program where like kids were dropped off early.
Yeah.
And I started talking about this movie, and one of the teachers overheard me talking about it and was like, "You do know that movie's not for kids, right?" And I'm like, yeah, but it's really good. Like there's something really, and I was like 9 or 8, and I kept talking about the movie, and I was like, but I've never seen it from the beginning because every time I catch it on TV, it's always the last like 30 minutes. Once Michael Meyers is already after Laurie Strode. So I never really knew what happened before those events of the film. I just saw a guy in a white mask
Mm-hmm.
chasing a woman across the street, and I was like, this is the music, the like, I didn't even know what cinematography was,
Yeah.
but something about what was happening on screen I was intrigued by.
Yeah.
And so she told me, she was like, well, I own it on VHS. And I was like, could I borrow it? I was 9.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, if you can get your mom to like sign a permission slip.
Yes. Yeah. If you can make it so I'm not fired for this, then yeah.
Then I guess I'll let you borrow it. Okay. So I go home. I don't know what I told my mom.
Yeah.
I don't know what I said to her, but she was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote me a permission slip and said, like, yes, my son can borrow this movie Halloween.
Yeah.
She might have thought it was like a Disney Channel movie. I have no idea what she thought. So I borrowed the VHS. I took it home, watched it from start to finish. And I think I had it for like 3 days. And I must have watched it at least 4 times.
Yeah.
Because I was so just like intrigued and captivated by the way it was shot, like everything, the whole production of the movie. And at that point, I was like in the beginning stages of understanding what filmmaking was.
Mm-hmm.
I had just seen Star Wars on the big screen because the re-release happened.
Yeah.
And I think I was just trying to soak up as much as I could around filmmaking, because it was like this new thing that I had discovered that I had a passion for. And I wanted to understand everything about all these movies that I was starting to really like grasp the concepts of.
Yeah.
And I think Halloween, for whatever reason, it must have been the cinematography, the music, the whole thing. It really like sunk its claws into me.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've watched it every single year on Halloween. The first Halloween movie I saw in theaters was H2O.
Yeah.
And I've just every year it's become an obsession more and more and more. And the more I learned about those movies, the more I loved them. Living in LA, we live right by, for years I lived right by South Pasadena.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, like 6 or 7 years ago, I took it upon myself to just go to South Pass.
Yeah.
And I found all the Halloween locations.
Yep.
So, and I go there all the time. I was just there 2 weekends ago in South Pasadena, and I shot some stuff that I'm going to make a reel into. So it's like Halloween has become a personality, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah. What I love,
I love those movies.
Yeah. What I love about your story, and for the people that might be on the younger side, will have no context for it, but people in our generation will be intimately familiar with this thing of you'll continually catch a movie on TV, and somehow it'll always be at the same spot. It'll be weeks, months, years later.
Time.
You hit the same time, and so you see that one section like. I think like a good example is like the only time I ever watched any of that Justin Long movie Accepted was when it was on weekends on Comedy Central, and somehow it was always at the same spot in the movie. You know what I mean? And so now it's like you don't have. That's been one of the interesting things about we discovered with our baby is, you know, when you're feeding or whatever, you know, I'm bottle feeding, and so you want something on. The Roku channel has these like live channels that like there's like a Dick Van Dyke channel that just is constantly playing Dick Van Dyke or whatever with ad breaks. And what I love, no matter what the show is or the channel is, it's all standard definition. So it could be Breaking Bad, and it still looks like a show from the '90s. That like, you know what I mean? That you're watching. And it kind of gives you back of that nostalgia of like, oh yeah, remember when like you would just see what's on.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And like AMC Fright Fest was that for me. And I don't even think I knew what AMC Fright Fest was.
Yeah.
The other one, vivid memory, and I think this is probably like what hooked me onto Halloween 2 was my grandpa he loved Jamie Lee Curtis. He loved her so much.
Understandable.
And when I would watch Halloween, he would come through the living room and he'd go, what are you? Because all you hear was dee 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 for 90 minutes. And he's like, what are you watching? And I'm like, oh, it's a horror movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. He's like, Jamie Lee Curtis, I love Jamie Lee Curtis. So he'd sit down and watch, and after 5 minutes, he was like, love Jamie Lee Curtis, don't love horror, I'm out. Bye.
Yeah. That's so funny that like big Jamie Lee Curtis fan doesn't know Halloween, like isn't like, Halloween.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of it, I'm sure part of it is because, you know, immigrant family came here after Halloween came out, had no idea what the fuck it even was. So, I get it.
So for me, it was, we've mentioned on other episodes, my introduction to horror came a little bit later. I came up in a more conservative household. We weren't playing a lot of horror films there.
Oh, you weren't 7 when you watched someone try to kill another person?
No,
oh, okay.
No. I wasn't. And unfortunately, a good friend of mine was very into the horror scene. I was able to educate me on a lot of that stuff when it came around college time. So I got into, and so for me, my introduction to Halloween was less as Halloween and more of my introduction to John Carpenter. Like, here's some of the big, you're going to want to watch Halloween. You're going to want to watch The Thing. You're going to, you know what I mean? That kind of a thing.
That's awesome.
And big fan. Big fan. It was weird. So we'll get into it. I've got some anecdotes. It wasn't able to dive as much as I have previously because my time's a little bit scattered at the moment. But I saw that like this was made with a bigger budget than Assault on Precinct 13. And I was like, I want to look more into that, but whatever. Anyway,
I can tell you exactly what the budget was.
Which was it?
$300,000
for this one. Yeah, which is, again, even at the time was not a lot.
No.
Even in 1978 money was not a lot. It just blew my mind that Assault on Precinct 13 was made for less because I felt like more happened in that movie. But that's kind of been John Carpenter's stock and trade for a bulk of his career, is he does a lot with a little. Like, you'll see one of his movies and then you'll find out what he made it for, and you're like, how?
Yeah.
Like, what did you do? Like,
how did you do this? What, you son of a bitch? What did you do?
Like, Escape from New York's like made for a song, and it's like, that's insane. That's insane.
I know.
God, Escape from New York's so good. Anyway, this isn't a John Carpenter show. It could be. If you wanted it, if you guys wanted it to be, it could be.
If you think that we're doing this podcast and we're not at some point going to be like, you know what? I know it's called Slash Pick, but let's do The Thing.
Dude, we'll get into it because it's so cool. Little weird Easter egg / calling your shot. One of the girls that's being babysitted, I think her name's Lindsay, is watching the original The Thing from Outer Space on TV. I'm like, that is incredible. Because
talk about manifesting, Jesus.
Totally. I think John Carpenter's The Thing, I would argue, if we were back in the old like movie fights days or whatever, I would argue that is the best horror movie. It is at least my favorite horror movie.
It's incredible.
It's a great movie.
It's another one that I watch every year.
Yeah, so good. So good. But let's get into our Terror Time Machine. We're going through these chronologically. We're now in the year of 1978, and we're doing this to kind of see what was in the zeitgeist at the time when this movie came out. So in January 15th of this year, Ted Bundy commits an infamous murder and assaults the Chi Omega sorority house in Florida State University. In January 25th through 27th, the Great Blizzard of 1978 strikes Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes, causing 51 deaths. January 28th, Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento, is arrested. And yes, that is a serial killer. The 60s and 70s were lousy with serial killers, man.
Jesus Lord.
I started, not to talk about stuff that's going to get this video demonetized or whatever, but too late. But there was a moment where I was kind of like, what? Was it just the lead in our gas and paint? Like, what was happening? Why was this happening? And then I thought, okay, wait a second. Because it just seemed like, I'll go through this list and you're like, how was all this happening? But you know what's not on this list is mass shootings. So it's like, maybe things aren't that much better. They're just different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's true. It's true. And also, like, I talk about this with my girlfriend all the time, not to like segue too much, but the thing that we talk about is we're so plugged in now that we know everything that happens at every minute of every single day. Yeah. You know, they have apps for like we have a neighborhood app that like tracks every single thing that happens in our neighborhood. Yeah. And every 5 minutes there's like a house on fire, a domestic disturbance, a this, a that. And I'm like, what? I'm too plugged in. I don't even know. But now, you know, you look back and you look at all the things that happen. It sounds like a lot, but compared to what's happening every minute of today, you're like, it doesn't even compare. It's still absolutely terrible. Yeah. But it's like you're saying, it's like, I think because just the way how we've been able to get our hands on things more easy nowadays. Yeah. You know, serial killers turn into mass shooters probably. I would not surprise me. Yeah, because it's just like everybody's got to give it helps. Because you watch stuff like this and you're like, wow, people were really afraid of serial killers. And it's like, well, I guess, that's so legit. Yeah. Statistically, you're probably okay, but there's a surprising amount of them running around. So in February 1st, Hollywood film director Roman Polanski flees to France to avoid sentencing after pleading guilty to unlawful sex with a minor. Boo Roman Polanski. Chinatown's a good movie, but boo Roman Polanski. February 15th, serial killer Ted Bundy is recaptured in Pensacola, Florida. February 16th, the Hillside Strangler.
And by the way,
people left their houses in the 70s.
yeah.
What the hell?
So just again for context, I did not look up, hey, serial killer shit in 1978. I just looked up what was going on in 1978, and this was it.
And they were like, "Hold your beer, DJ. Hold your beer."
The Hillside Strangler, a serial killer prowling Los Angeles, claims a 10th and final victim. February 24th, 5 men and with mild mental health issues from Yuba City, California, disappear in the snow on their way home from a basketball game. And in June, 4 of the bodies are discovered in the Sierra. The 5th, Gary Mathias, is never found. The circumstances surrounding their death remains a mystery. April
sketch.
Yeah. April 3rd, the 50th Academy Award ceremony was held. I do this to give you context about what else is being released at this time.
In April?
In April, yeah. And it was hosted by Bob Hope for the final time. And Woody Allen's, speaking of sex offenders, Woody Allen's Annie Hall, allegedly, Woody Allen's Annie Hall wins Best Picture, with Allen winning Best Director. George Lucas's Star Wars wins 6 awards.
Oh, right.
While Fred Zinnemann's Julia and Herbert Ross's The Turning Point have both received 11 nominations each. It's one of the things I love about the Academy Awards. They're like, Annie Hall, Star Wars. You're like, yeah. And then they're like, Julia. And The Turning Point, you're like, good for them, I guess. I don't even know what those are.
Awesome. Love it.
April 27th, the Willow Island disaster, the deadliest construction accident in United States history. 51 construction workers are killed when a cooling tower under construction collapses at the Pleasance Tower Station in Willow Island, West Virginia. And May 25th, a bomb explodes in the security section of Northwestern University, wounding a security guard. This is the first Unabomber attack. On June 9th, the Church of Latter-day June 9th, the Church of Jesus of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, extends the priesthood and temple blessings to, quote, all worthy males, ending a general policy that excludes, quote, Canaanites from priesthood ordination and temple ordinances. I will let you all infer the implications of that on your own. Who would the Canaanites be? And why would you refer to them that way? Let's move on. June 12th, serial killer David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, is sentenced to 365 years in prison. June 16th, the musical film Grease is released, starring 20-year-old New Jersey-born actor John Travolta and 29-year-old British-Australian actress Olivia Newton-John. And June 19th, Garfield, which eventually becomes the world's most widely syndicated comic strip, makes its debut nationwide. That's right. Garfield came out the same year as Grease and Halloween.
And Superman.
In case in your brain, all those would have to be different times. Those couldn't all be the same year.
That's crazy. Wow.
June 25th, the rainbow flag of the LGBT movement flies for the first time in its original form at the San Francisco Gay Freedom Day Parade. And June 29th, actor Bob Crane, who you may know from Hogan's Heroes, or depending on how young you are, you may not know at all, is found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment. The crime is never solved.
What?
Yeah, so my family are big Hogan's Heroes fans. I've watched my fair share of that show, and then you look it up, and it's like, oh yeah, the lead on that was murdered, and they never figured out why.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Cool. August 2nd, President Jimmy Carter declares an unprecedented state of emergency and evacuation immediately following the revelation that Niagara Falls, New York neighborhood Love Canal is built on a toxic waste dump. Maybe that's why we got so many fucking serial killers running around. Towns built on toxic waste dumps.
Explains it all.
October 25th, 1978, Halloween is released, the movie we're talking about today. On November 17th, the Star Wars Holiday Special airs on CBS. This is its first and only airing. Can you watch that on Disney Plus? They should put that on Disney Plus.
That's a really good question. I actually don't know if it is on Disney Plus, but I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere.
I'm sure you can find
archive.org, because archive.org has literally everything in existence.
Yeah.
It feels like.
I'm sure you can find it somewhere. November 18th, the mass murder suicide of 909 Americans in Jonestown. Is that right? 909? Did I pull that number right? In Jonestown, Guyana, under direction of Jim Jones. 900. Sorry, everybody. I'm going to pause real quick. Because obviously I'm familiar with the Jonestown massacre.
Mm-hmm.
909? That can't be. A total of 909 individuals died in Jonestown itself, all but 2 from the apparent cyanide poisoning. God damn it.
Jesus.
What the fuck was going on in the 70s and 60s, man?
Yowza, that's crazy.
So for purposes of this show, not to gloss over the death of 909 people, but I believe the 2013 film The Sacrament by Ty West was inspired by the Jonestown Massacre. Sacramento is a good movie. And we will probably get to, if this show runs long enough, we'll probably get to some Ty West joints down the line.
Oh yeah. Really quick, the Star Wars Holiday Special is not on Disney Plus, but it is on YouTube.
Yeah, put it on Disney Plus, man. Come on, Disney.
Yeah,
Come on. Come on. So November 27th, San Francisco, California, Mayor George Moscone and City Supervisor Harvey Milk are assassinated by former Supervisor Dan White. And by the way, Dianne Feinstein, I believe it is the one that replaces, was it George Moscone? Anyway, she gets brought in right after this, and she served right up until like last year.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, December 15th, Superman is released in the United States. If you want to check out my conversation with Sal about that, Krypton Academy, it's on this channel. And December 22nd, Chicago serial killer John Wayne Gacy is subsequently convicted of the murder of 33 young men, is arrested. Jeez Louise. Whew. So many of these fucking weirdos running around.
It's exhausting. At that point, I'm surprised anyone was even interested in watching Halloween.
Yeah, for real. And when it's interesting, I wonder, like, when it comes to modern slasher movies, obviously, and it's good that we're talking about Halloween, because this is, we started with Psycho because that's technically the first one. Right. Texas Chainsaw Massacre really laid the pavement. But for what will become the standard operating procedure for slasher films, moving primarily in the 80s, but moving forward, starts here with Halloween. But in the now times, we still make slasher movies, but it's like I felt this a lot with the new Halloweens. It's like, but this isn't what we're dealing with now. But there's not a appropriate way to say this, but there's like a fun, like these guys have gimmicks and they've got their little weapons and everything. I don't know that there's a way to make mass shootings fun. Like a fun little spooky afternoon with the girl or the boy, whoever you're dating. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And slasher movies are also interesting because whether or not we'll get to some of the Halloween sequels, who knows? But even like the concept of a slasher pick nowadays is so different than what it was in 1970.
Yes.
Also,
yes.
Like the simplicity we'll talk about, like the simplicity of Halloween is not really something you can do it today, but I don't know if it would have the same effect like it did in 1978, where Halloween was kind of the first of its kind. And you had Halloween, you had a few other movies, but really it's the first two that we talked about, Psycho and Texas Chainsaw, that really kind of like set the standard or set some kind of expectation for these movies. And then Halloween is the one that kind of made everybody go, oh, we should just manufacture these because these would be so fun. Yeah, it becomes
obviously not here, but after this it becomes franchisable, and that becomes a big component. And I'm excited. I believe, if my schedule's right, the next one we're going to be talking about is the first Friday the 13th, and that'll be interesting to get into because then you can really, especially those first 3 movies, you can really chart the evolution of the genre. As they're like, oh, this is what we're doing now. Got it. This is how we're doing it. But before we get into, I do have a little bit of behind the mask, a little bit of behind the scenes stuff. So this was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. Hill had worked as a babysitter during her teenage years. She wrote most of the female characters' dialogue. Homage is paid to Alfred Hitchcock with 2 characters' names. Tommy Doyle is named after Lieutenant Detective Thomas Doyle from Rear Window, and Dr. Loomis's name is derived from Sam Loomis, which we covered on Psycho. The boyfriend of Marion Crane. The Sam Loomis in Psycho is the boyfriend of Marion Crane's character, who was played by Janet Leigh, who's the real life mother of Jamie Lee Curtis. And then Hill says, learning that Jamie Lee Curtis was the daughter of psycho actress Janet Leigh, quote, I knew casting Jamie Lee would be great publicity for the film because her mother was in Psycho. So,
of course,
listen,
goes without saying.
Of course it is, and that's how we do stuff. It's just, I know Jamie Lee Curtis has been a little frustrated with the concept of nepo babies, but it's like, you know, it doesn't take. You've had a decades-long career.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis also seems like she has a very complicated relationship with her family.
Yes,
right.
Undoubtedly.
Like, am I the only?
Yeah.
I feel like most people kind of get that impression whenever she talks about like her relationship with her mother and father. Maybe they were good.
Yeah.
But it's like always. Every time I watch some kind of an interview and she's talking about that, it always feels kind of like, yeah, I don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's part of my history. And I'm like, well, it is.
Yeah.
Can't really ignore it.
It is all right.
Your mom was in Psycho. Come on.
So after Halloween, Nick Castle played The Shape. The three actors played Michael at different stages in the film. Nick Castle played him as The Shape, quote unquote, The Shape. And I didn't realize this. After Halloween, Castle became a director, taking helm of films such as The Last Starfighter, The Boy Who Could Fly, Dennis the Menace, and Major Pain.
Sir.
That's insane. That's wild.
I don't think I found that out until I was like I want to say in high school or later, especially Dennis the Menace. That one really, I was like, Nick Castle, hold on.
Yeah.
Click, 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 click. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Michael Myers made Dennis the Menace.
They made Dennis the Menace and then Major Pain.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tommy Lee Walsh, who was a production designer on the film, created the trademark mask worn by Michael Myers. This is a well-known lore from the movie. From a Captain Kirk mask purchased for $1.98 from a costume shop on Hollywood Boulevard. Carpenter recalls how Wallace, quote, widened the eye holes and spray painted the flesh a bluish white. In the script, it said Michael Myers' mask was had the pale features of a human face, and it truly was spooky looking. I can only imagine the result if they hadn't painted the mask white. Children would be checking their closet for William Shatner after Tommy got through with it.
Have you seen that original mask, by the way? Do you know what it looks like?
No, I don't remember.
It is hellishly creepy.
Yeah.
It is so uncomfortable.
The concept of doing a mask of a person's face is misguided. That's not how you do. You can do creepy stuff, but it's like, just a William Shatner mask. No, that's a mistake. That's a mistake.
Well, especially, I think the mask was made in 1976. So, technologically, like they're not where they're at today, where they can do so many details.
Yes.
So it just looks like William Shatner's loose skin with eye holes.
Yes.
And it's so uncomfortable.
Great.
Like it's almost to the point where I'm like, you could have just ripped the sideburns off and not spray painted white, and it would have been horrifying.
It would have been just as horrifying. Carpenter's direction for Castle and his role as Myers was minimal. For example, when Castle asked what Myers' motivation was for a particular scene, Carpenter replied that his motivation was to walk from one set marker to another and, quote, not act.
Yep.
By Carpenter's account, the only direction he gave Castle was during the murder sequence of Bob, in which he told Castle to tilt his head and examine the corpse as if it, quote, were a butterfly collection. And that's obviously, I think of that as very iconic and very like, that's who Michael is. That's the moment where you're like, oh, that's who this guy is. Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Michael is one of those, and we're going to talk about it as we get into it. It's one of those, the less you know, the better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's all just kind of there on the page, right? When he talks about how he gave Nick Castle very little direction. It would just go from point A to point B.
Yes.
And I think that is another element of these movies, just in general as a genre, that they've tried so hard as they've like remade them, redone them, rebooted them. Lore. You don't need it. It's just... Michael Myers works because his only intention is to kill.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, and
he just wants to make a fun house out of all of his murders. That's all he wants to do. He wants to make his own haunted house. That's it.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because Carpenter also mentioned that part of his inspiration for making this movie is he wanted to make like a haunted house movie, like specifically like when you go through like a haunted house attraction.
Yeah.
And we mentioned it in our Black Christmas episode, but since that's coming out after, I'm going to mention it here. That the director, Bob Clark, did an interview where he suggested that Carpenter took some inspiration from Black Christmas, the 1974 Black Christmas.
Right.
Here's that quote. I did a film about 3 years later, started a film with John Carpenter. It was his first film at Warner Brothers. he asked me if I was ever going to do a sequel to Black Christmas. And I said, no, I was through with horror. I didn't come into this business to do just horror. He said, well, what would you do if you did a sequel? I said it would be the next year and the guy would have actually been caught, escaped from a mental institution, go back to the house, and they would start all over again. And I would call it Halloween. The truth is, John didn't copy Black Christmas. He wrote a script, directed the script, did the casting. Halloween is his movie, and besides, the script came to him already titled anyway. He liked Black Christmas, and that may have been influenced by it. But in no way did John Carpenter copy the idea. 15 other people at the time had thought to do a movie called Halloween, but the script came to John with that title on it. And I think I really like the way Bob Clark frames this. And having never seen Black Christmas before we did our episode on it, I wouldn't have known this. But now having seen that and then seen this, it's like, oh, John Carpenter was definitely influenced by Black Christmas. They both opened with POV tracking shots. There's definitely like a little bit of overlap there, which I think is great. That's exactly what you should do. It's like, this movie's great. I want to make my version of that. And because you're John Carpenter, it ends up being iconic.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is, and you maybe have this in your notes, but even though John Carpenter and Deborah Hill wrote the film, it wasn't his concept and his idea.
Yeah. It was the producers came to him like, hey, we want to do.
Irvin Yablans basically came up with the idea of the babysitter murders, which was the original title of the movie. And then he pitched it to Carpenter. Carpenter liked the concept, and maybe throughout that process, he thought of movies like Black Christmas and thought like, oh, well, let's do this. Let's set it on a holiday. You know, like, let's change it up a little bit. Let Deborah and I take a pass on it. And also, weirdly enough, like, the title Halloween had never been used up to that point. Just as a singular title in any movie, which is like crazy. And that's how we eventually get to Halloween, which was really cool. Yeah, absolutely.
And so now let's get into it. Let's slide into Halloween proper and foreplay.
Let's go to South Pass.
Let's go to South Pass, aka Haddonfield, Illinois. We open on jack-o'-lanterns, and this is the best slasher score, right? This is it.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever heard a rendition of Carpenter's Halloween theme that's not good.
That's not really good.
It's that simplicity. It's just the four notes, the da 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 da, and you just add. Every movie elevates a little bit. Like, it goes into synth at one point. Then there's some orchestra, and you're like, you can't fail with this score. Yeah. It's so easy and good.
Yeah. And it's so iconic, and it's such a good way. It carries so much personality, because I think what you want is that element with a slasher. You want that element of, especially once we start getting into this era, with the franchisable era, where you're like, oh, shit is on. And, with Jason, it's the Jason, whatever. Freddy, whatever. Freddy's got his dream stuff. But like, this score, it's like, this is, I think as we go through this, the question that's going to hang over this episode for me is this the best slasher movie? And I think it is. I think I will say maybe the Scream franchise is the most consistently good slasher franchise.
Oh, we should definitely have that conversation of which franchise is the consistently the best.
Yes,
because that's really interesting. Because Halloween has some real shitters in there.
Yeah. They all do, dude. They all do. So at this point, every year my wife and I have gone through different franchises. We went through Child's Play. We went through Halloween one year. I think the only one I haven't gone through is Friday. And it's like, they all have some real stinkers.
I got that whole box set up there, baby. It's so good.
They all got, every one of them so far, some real stinkers in there. Okay. So we're on after that incredible opening title theme. We open with Halloween 1963, Haddonfield, Illinois. We get our opening POV shot, just like Black Christmas, from the perspective of we learn a young baby Michael Meyers as he watches his sister make out with a dweeb using a clown mask. What we will learn is it's his mask. And it's one of those, were you just pissy that he used your mask to kiss your sister? although now that I say that out loud, I think this builds into this argument I want to make in this episode about Michael and his motivation, but we're going to get into that in a second. So Michael go upstairs. The dweeb leave. By the way, okay. So the sister and the boyfriend are making out downstairs. They're like, let's go upstairs. They go upstairs, and like 5 seconds later, he comes back down.
And
it's like,
oh no, he's a two-pump chump.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. And this won't be the last time in the movie where, like, intimacy happens. I mean, I guess they're high schoolers, so it's like, you haven't worked out the kinks, but like, really? All right.
It might have been his first time. Who knows?
Who knows? So he goes back downstairs. Michael goes upstairs wearing a clown outfit, and he sees his sister topless, boobies and violence, sex and violence gang.
Yeah, which me watching it for the first time on VHS, I was like, oh Lord.
Yeah, I hope my mom doesn't walk in on this one. My teacher. Don't worry, my teacher gave me this movie. It's okay.
With permission, I don't know what to tell you. You signed the papers.
You signed the papers. So he kills his sister. He comes downstairs, and now we see that it was a little kid that did this killing, and the parents arrive and find him. And I love the
creepy ass kid.
The creepy ass kid. I love the mom's expression because it's this blank like what now? Like
just holding a giant kitchen knife, going, now what?
Now what, Michael? Oh my God. Did you kill another neighborhood cat again? Oh man. Oh, Michael. Cut to October 30th, 1978. What is that? 15 years later?
15 years later. Michael Myers was 6 and now he's 21.
21. Dr. Loomis. Oh baby. Dr. Loomis. Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. God. Pulls up to an asylum with a nurse that's scolding him for his lack of compassion for Michael, as he refers to Michael as it. And as they pull up, the inmates are roaming around, and Michael, a patient that we learn is Michael, assaults the nurse in the car and escapes in the car. How did Michael learn to drive? Adam, you're a resident Halloween
someone
fan.
Around here gave him lessons.
And it's worth noting, and later, like, he kills people with cars. Michael knows how to drive.
Yeah, he's very efficient.
Yeah, he's an efficient driver. Do we know how Michael learned to drive? And if not, how has that not been one of these sequels where it's going to be a prequel, he's going to be killing people in the asylum, and this is how he learns to drive?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up because in Rob Zombie's movie, he does not drive at all.
Yes.
Because Rob Zombie was like, no one around here gave him lessons.
Yeah.
That's dumb. And I'm like, he's a serial killer. Yeah. He just pushes on the thing and it goes, and he turns wheel.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's the other thing. What is your perspective on Michael vis-a-vis how supernatural he is? Are you like, the Michael in my brain is not supernatural at all? He kind of teeters the line, or like, no, Michael is beyond human?
That is a really good question, and I feel like I've been going back and forth with that because the movies definitely lean it in a specific direction.
Yeah.
In multiple times.
Yeah.
I think that he is somewhere like right at the borderline of being supernatural, but not totally supernatural. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, characters like Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, those guys are supernatural to me, because they have some incredibly crazy shit happen to them.
Yeah.
And they survive those things. Like, Freddy Krueger literally burns to death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know Michael Myers does too.
Yeah.
But I think like anytime Michael Myers by the end of a movie escapes whatever happens to him, he usually gets like stabbed or shot multiple times, but it's never to the point where he's so shot up that it feels like it could be a final moment for that character. Yeah. Maybe there definitely are one or two movies where it's like, okay, he has to be dead. And you're like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
He's right on that borderline of like probably being dead, but also I could understand how someone like that, who is the embodiment of evil, could survive it. So it's like he's somewhere like tiptoeing that line of still something human about him, but mostly just an embodiment of evil, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. And does that mean he's a completely supernatural being? You could argue it both ways, but I think he kind of is, but also isn't.
Yeah. I think that's the safe spot. I think whenever they try to lean too far in one direction, it doesn't quite work for the character. But
really quick, how many Halloween movies have you seen?
All of them, I think.
Oh, you've seen all of them?
I've seen all of them. Yeah. At this point, I had, because we did that run through and I saw the new ones. And then, I think I've seen all of them.
So you must love the concept of him being part of a cult.
Yeah, the cult and all the, obviously the Sam Hain was an influence on this movie, although they don't mention it. I like, because again, I think the magic of Michael is the unknowable. I think that's part of what makes him scary. You're not really seeing his face. You're not really knowing what motivates him. He is just this force that could be human, could be not. I think the way we're describing is almost a Batman situation, where it's a human being that's so laser focused on one thing that they almost transcend humanness.
It's like the ultimate case of tunnel vision.
Yeah. But I do think for me and we're going to get into this more. I think for me in the movies, the thing that we could explore more that would be interesting to me is the Loomis of it all, because I think Loomis to me is the secret sauce of these movies.
Totally.
And I wish, especially you're not going to get it much in this movie, but especially in the sequels, Loomis is at least as crazy as Michael is, at least as crazy.
Oh, without question. Without question.
To a point, like I might have mentioned this on another episode, to the point where I wanted at some point for somebody to mention, like, oh no, he's not a licensed therapist. He was a patient with Michael who just thinks he's Michael's doctor. I don't know how this guy got a gun. I don't know why he shows up. Like, I'd love to do a movie. If somebody were to like, DJ, you're doing a Halloween. One, how do we have like a Nurse Ratched Netflix series and not a Loomis Netflix series? Like, I want to know this guy's backstory. But also, I think it'd be interesting. I think the Rob Zombie ones almost like, no, they don't really. I think this is what I wanted the Rob Zombie ones to do, and they don't. I wanted to be like, Michael's a problem, right? He's a murderer. But Sam Loomis or Dr. Loomis makes it much worse. Like, him showing up, it makes the town go crazy and like escalates everything. Because I think there's something there to be talked about, how like your fear of the thing is actually worse than the thing itself. But Donald Pleasence,
you're projecting a lot on top of it. Yeah.
Donald Pleasence is so great in these movies.
I know.
Oh,
that's what I think I would. Well, we could talk about later, but like the Loomis character is such it is like Batman and Joker in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's like I get the James, and obviously Donald Pleasence is no longer with us, and obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is Laurie. Jamie Lee Curtis is great whenever you could get her in something, pull in something, but it's like. I don't know that the final girl in this one is the secret sauce. I think Loomis is. I think Loomis is the guy. I think you need the Loomis of it all. You need a Loomis.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally because Loomis is just that one character that you're like, God, he is Michael Myers unhinged, but he can actually like speak words, and you're like, this guy's just the energy that he gives. You're like, this dude is either terrified beyond belief, or is as completely unhinged as Michael Myers.
He is the embodiment of that Danny DeVito meme where he's like, and I just came in blasting. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Like, that's the energy he's coming in with. Exactly. Anyway, we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. So, Michael's escaped. We go back to Haddonfield where we meet Laurie, of course, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who's dropping off a key at the Meyers house, who her dad is selling. He works real estate. He's selling the Meyers house, which has been abandoned since the murders. Michael is in the house and he sees Laurie, and what's the boy's name? Tommy is the
Tommy Doyle.
Tommy Doyle. And we will retcon this in later movies, but as far as this movie's concerned, that's pretty much all Michael needs. He's at his house, he sees these two people, and he's like, good enough.
yeah, absolutely.
Good enough.
Yeah, which it definitely changes in the sequels, and it even changes in the Rob Zombie movie. You get more context, but it's really like he just went home. That was it.
Yeah. He just went home, he sees them, and he spends basically the rest of the day stalking these two people as we kind of learn a little bit about their lives and their friendships and their relationship to stuff. Meanwhile, Loomis is like flipping out about Michael being on the loose. He is making a phone call to Haddonfield, like basically, you got to get ready. If you're not ready, if they die, it's going to be your fault. And he just so happens to be making this phone booth call right by a truck, like a repair truck that Michael ran off the road. And this is how he gets his like famous jumpsuit. And then
they had 2 nickels and like a few pennies to make that movie.
Yep. And somehow you made like one of the most iconic slasher characters.
It's so dumb and genius at the same time. It's crazy.
So Laurie meets up with her friends, and Michael's driving around, and there's a moment where they're like, is that what's his face? Like, they think it's one of his friends. It's like, the car has the state seal on the side. What are you talking about?
I know, yeah.
What are you talking about?
It says like the sanitarium official, whatever. You're like, no.
Yeah, that's not your friend, man.
No.
So Laurie, where are we at with stuff? Laurie runs into Officer Brackett, who is her friend Annie's dad. He's going to end up getting hooked up with Loomis. He says the iconic line, it's Halloween. Everybody's entitled to one good scare. Perfect. Love it. Put it on the poster, put it in the trailer. That's a winner.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, great scene. Every Loomis scene is great. He gets a ride to the graveyard. And this is legitimately beyond the fact that I love Donald Pleasance as Loomis, and there's just this unhinged energy in every scene he's in. The exchange is actually kind of stuff that like Carpenter's really good at, because the grave, the groundskeeper starts like, oh man, this happened in this other town down the street. And it's perfectly paced, because he's like, the guy's at dinner and he has dinner with his whole family, and then he excuses himself, and then he goes out to the shed. Take, too. Yeah, he goes out in the shed and he gets a hacksaw, and then he comes back and Loomis cuts him off. I'm like, perfect. I don't need to know how that one ends. That's perfect.
Where are we? Yeah. Where are we? What plot number is this? Yeah. It's that like you're so right. And I'm sure I picked this up, but I didn't even like think about it until in the moment. But like, yeah, it's such a perfect way. It just perfectly displays how good Carpenter is as like and timing.
Yes.
Because he does that whole entire thing in one take, and they're walking. And then, like you said, it's like the perfect cutoff to then get back into, because you get kind of lost. You get kind of lost in what the groundskeeper's saying, and you're like, oh, what's this story? And then Loomis cuts it off, and you're like, oh yeah, is the grave there?
Is the grave there? Yeah, because that's the great reveal, is that the and that's, I think this is really kind of, I mean, maybe the driving one I just think is funny. This I think is your first real hint that there's something more to Michael, like on a physical level, because that gravestone's gone, which is insane. That's insane.
Yeah, that's a giant slab of granite or whatever it is, marble. I don't know.
And so, but what narratively, I think what it does a lot of things really well, because it helps establish that Michael's not necessarily unique. He is, because he's clearly super strong and he went to insane asylum. But this idea we're in a world where people just murder people. And it leaves you with that sense of anticipation. This whole first like 2 acts of the movie is building this sense of like dread and anticipation that of course is cathartically released in the final moments with the big, now what every slasher movie does, the big final chase. So, he's taking the grave of his mom, right? It's his mom's gravestone.
Sister Judith.
Sister. Is it okay, it's Judith's gravestone. And Annie and Laurie they're driving around and smoking a J. And they drive by Sheriff Brackett, who's just after a store, like a convenience store, was robbed.
Hardware
store, which has Halloween masks for whatever reason. It was a different time.
In the 70s, anything's possible, I guess.
It's a different time, baby.
He took a rope, a knife, and a couple of masks. And you're like, what fucking hardware store did you go to?
And again, it's like we were talking about earlier, just the pure narrative simplicity. Where did Michael get his jumpsuit? He ran that car off the road. Where did he get the mask and the knives he uses? He just robbed the store. There's no he just robbed the store and wasn't caught.
Which is genius, because you basically established that mask just exists in that world.
Yes.
So anyone could wear it, which they take advantage of.
Yep. So Loomis at this point, Loomis is now teamed up with Sheriff Brackett. He gets him to drive around to Meyers' house, where we get to a sequence I had forgotten about. They find a dead dog in the house, and the implication is Michael was eating it.
And it's all those like little tiny clues. He's able to pick up the headstone. He's able to strangle, kill, and eat a dog. You're like, okay, this is something different. Like, because I feel like for me, the whole time I watched the first time, I'm thinking it's a man, it's a guy, it's like a young kid, it's a young kid, whatever. But like all these tiny little droplets, these little nuggets into Michael Myers, it really gets the gears going. You start thinking to yourself, okay, he's not a man.
Yeah.
Or he's not just a man.
Yeah.
He's something else.
Yeah.
Because he's doing weird shit. He's picking up heavy things and he's eating pets.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting it.
He's something a little bit beyond what we're prepared for. What you're almost kind of, this is done a little bit more seriously, but it almost gets into No Country for Old Men territory, where it's like, this is just a thing we're not prepared for. Like, it's not, we're not wired to understand what this thing is. So we get back to what we built towards is on this night, Laurie is babysitting Tommy. In one house across the street, Annie's babysitting Lindsay. And then their friend Linda is the other friend, right? Is going to show up later to get killed. So they're talking on the phone. We find out like Laurie's into this one guy. It'll matter in later movies, but it doesn't really matter here. And Annie, like while she's on the phone, she spills something on her and like immediately like in the kitchen just undresses. And what we see is like Michael's in the window. And here's my pet theory about Halloween that I think is true in this movie that is dropped in later movies. I think Michael murdering is a sex thing. I think it is intended to be a sex thing because every time we cut to Michael, we get the and it always kills when he sees
his jumpsuit's tightening slowly.
Exactly. And he always kills around naked titties. Like that's kind of like one of his main things. Like he sees his sister naked, making out with a boy naked, kills her. Sees Annie naked, this is where we start the road to killing Annie. Kills Linda after she has sex. I think and it's not originally when I was watching these movies with my wife, it was like a joke. And then as the movie went on, I'm like, actually, I honestly think I think John Carpenter's intention is that this is a sex thing. That's my.
I mean, it's very, very possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if John Carpenter has ever like gone. I'm sure that there's so many documentaries about Halloween, and even I haven't watched all of them.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there has to be some kind of a conversation, some kind of a dialogue of like, what is partially driving Michael to kill these characters? Because he could have picked any single person anywhere.
Yeah.
Or he also could have just gone after Laurie because that's the first person he sees.
Yeah.
And he just so happens to see Annie and
Linda.
Oh my God.
I think it's Linda.
Yeah. But like he decides to just kind of like play cat and mouse with them and then get them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is he jealous that they're really enjoying themselves? They're enjoying their life because they are having sex, or because they can express their sexuality, or they can, do all these things. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
I kill you.
Yeah.
I don't like this.
Yeah. I think my pet theory, my headcanon is that Michael has some confusing feelings about sexuality that he cannot process in a healthy manner, and he expresses himself violently, and that first expressed itself in childhood and is still true to this day. At least in this movie. In later movies, it's going to be like Laurie's is his sister, and also there's a cult that wants him to do stuff, and it's like.
But that's interesting though, right? Is that it kind of shifts. In the first movie, he's just kind of targeting naked teenagers for the most part.
Yeah.
And then as you get into the more lore stuff, there still are moments where he targets people who happen to be naked or happen to be having sex. But it's like it's now being driven by other narratives in the story. It's family related. It's this related. You're like, all right, well. But then I feel like other slasher movies definitely run with those ideas.
Definitely. Well, it becomes like obviously the stuff with it's specifically baked in. I think what this franchise has always struggled with is what makes the original great, and what we've been talking about is that ambiguity, and it's hard to, I think, like franchise studio brain, it's hard to accept the ambiguity. Like, well, it can't be ambiguous; it's got to be.
Well, it's also really hard to replicate that. Because then you're like, well, you just remade the first movie, you just different characters, different houses.
Yeah.
How do you which is why I think Carpenter never wanted to make sequels.
Yep. Understandably, probably a good instinct. Although I do like some of the sequels. We're getting to a moment that I really love. So there is a moment, speaking of sex stuff, there's this weird moment where like Annie gets stuck in a window with like
in the laundry room.
All right, this is somebody's fantasy. This is somebody's.
She's bent over with half her body out the window.
So Annie drops off Lindsay over at Laurie and Tommy so she can go get laid. But when she gets back in her car, the window is fogged from the outside, which means.
But also,
it's.
I love the way they play it.
Yeah.
Because she goes to the car, it's locked.
Yeah.
So she realizes, oh, I don't have the keys. I can go back in the house and get the keys.
Yeah.
And then she's singing, oh, Paul. She goes back to the car, unlatches or opens the door.
Yeah.
Doesn't even realize the door's now unlocked. And she gets in.
Yeah.
And it's all glossed over.
It's glossed over on the outside, which means it's colder inside the car than it is outside. That's another. Michael is in the car, but instead of making it warmer, he's made it colder.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great little, because she goes and touches the window, but it doesn't mark. And it's like, it's another one of those things that, like, that's a good touch, man. That's a good.
Yeah.
John Carpenter is good at this shit, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and Michael kills her in the car.
Oh yeah. By the way,
Michael kills her in the car.
Annie dead. Doesn't make it. Sorry,
Doesn't make it. Sorry. Laurie's blonde friend. That's how I have notes. It's Linda. I was able to catch the name later. It's Linda. Linda shows up at the house that Annie was at with her boyfriend, but of course Annie's gone in more ways than one. And Linda and Bob start making out, and Michael sees them making out, which of course means they are not long for this world.
They dead.
They dead. So there's this sex scene with Bob, and of course, like Bob is struggling. The phone is ringing. Bob's struggling to finish the act, and then literally the second they pull the phone off the hook, and like within seconds they're done. So again,
two pump chumps in this movie.
I know, man. It's just whatever. Teenagers in the 70s. I don't know. Anyway. Bob goes to get them a beer, and this is where we get the iconic kill where Michael pins Bob to the wall, which I don't think would work, but it's awesome. So who gives a shit?
No, because the kitchen knife would have to be like 24 inches long.
Yeah, 24 inches. And also his body, like what's supporting him there? Like his rib cage, like what's.
Exactly.
But it doesn't matter.
You know what? It looks cool as shit.
It looks dope, and we get that moment, which is the most characterization Michael gets, and I think should get. I think it's a good instinct on John Carpenter's part, where he looks at
admiring his artwork
as if. I mean, again, that's the ambiguity. Like, I think that's a really good read of it. I think my read of is he doesn't know what. It's like, what is this? Is this something? What is this? What's going? Like, he doesn't. All I think it really implies is Michael views this differently than we would.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In the broadest sense, and the specificity in there. It's up to interpretation, baby.
Yeah.
I like your thought that, he's trying to make this haunted house because Michael does like his gimmicks. He likes his bits, as we learn right after this, because he goes back upstairs dressed in a ghost sheet.
Oh yeah.
I like.
I think Michael Myers is like. He is the biggest fan of Halloween. He is like Halloween stan at the maximum level.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, my mom and dad wouldn't let me go to haunted houses when I was a kid. Fine. Yeah. I'll make my own.
Yeah. I love that interpretation. That's a good one. I like that a lot. I think when I was watching it this time, my headcanon was like, Michael's like, oh shit, okay, kill this guy. I got to go upstairs. I can't go up looking like this. I got to put on a disguise. And so he just puts a sheet on. It's like, this'll do. This is it. Yeah. I got it.
Yeah. Yep. Again.
Yeah.
The simplicity and stupidity of how simple it is.
Yes.
He puts a sheet on.
Yep.
And the gimmick, Bob the Ghost.
Yeah.
Is so popular. Mm-hmm. It has action figures.
Yep.
It has pins. It has T-shirts. You just put a sheet on with glasses.
Yep.
With holes cut out.
Yep.
That's it. So stupid.
Do you have any Halloween action figures?
Oh yeah, for sure, I do. I have a Michael Myers action figure in the closet, the NECA one, which is really really cool.
Yeah,
and I actually do have a Bob the Ghost T-shirt and pin.
Yeah,
which I don't know. I have them on my jacket. I think I don't have them here.
Yeah, the NECA released. Speaking of NECA, they did. I think it was from Halloween 2. Michael Myers,
Loomis and Michael,
and I'm like, that's the one I need. That's the one I know.
And I'm such a dum-dum because I'm that person that I'm like, I would love to have these.
Yeah.
I don't need them. Mm-hmm. And then they sell out and I'm like, why didn't I just buy one?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? You can put them anywhere. Just display them anywhere.
I've been in the same boat many a time. Well, especially now in the collector era where it's like, am I going to put down 50, 60, 70 bucks on this?
I know. Yeah. And like, so I bought the Halloween Kills NECA figure.
Yeah.
And I got it for $25 and it's so cool.
Yes.
And I got it and I was like, I should have just bought them. Like, just who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Who's going to stop?
You really don't want it?
Yeah.
Just eBay it. You're fine.
Mm-hmm. He chokes Laurie out, he chokes Linda out with the phone cord while she's on the phone with Laurie, and she's like moaning, which again, I think it's all a sex thing, dude. I think Michael's whole bit, it's a whole sex thing. Laurie finally makes her way over to the house where Annie and Linda were at. And Laurie goes in the bedroom and finds Annie's corpse with the Judith Meyers headstone over it. This is where Michael's really playing games. And then like Bob is like dangling down, and then like if Linda's like shoved in a closet or something like that.
Yeah. The door like creaks open, and she sees like half her body.
Yep.
In the closet.
Yep. And this is where we get our final big chase between Laurie and Michael.
Also, this shot.
Yep.
Like cinematography magic at its finest, of putting Michael Myers in the back of this hallway or inside of this bedroom.
Yeah.
And all they used was a dimmer, and they just dimmed the light up a little bit to reveal his face.
Yeah.
And it is so perfectly done.
It's a good use of and you know what's crazy, man, is you've also seen all the Halloweens. It's crazy how the mask never looks this good until the 2018 reboot. Like it's like how does it keep looking worse? Like what do you do? Just get that mask from that one. What are we doing?
So bad. Yeah, well, and I know from what little I know, I should say, well, Halloween 2 reuses the same mask.
Yeah, Halloween 2 is pretty close, but like everything after, it's like, what are we doing?
The problem is that in Halloween 2, it was like Deborah Hill had it under her bed in a box, so it got kind of messed up a little bit, like 2-3 years. And then the actor's different, so it looks different on Dick Warlock's face.
Yeah.
But then by the time you get to 4, they're just trying to like remake the mask.
Yeah.
And they look terrible. And in H2O, they have the audacity to even put a CG mask in one shot. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, what are you
Stop
doing?
it.
How did we lose the mask technology? Like I have, to be generous, I have mixed feelings about the new trilogy that just came out. Michael's look is not one of them. That's like, you nailed it. That's right.
Not
correct. Good job.
Yeah.
So now we get this whole iconic chase. And Myers slashes Laurie. She falls down the stairs. I've had a friend that fell down the stairs. That shit will fuck you up. Laurie escapes. She runs across the street. She's locked out of the house. Unclear how that happened. You're the one that left. Weren't you the one that locked it? Maybe she dropped the keys when she fell down the stairs. Maybe I missed something.
I think that's what they imply, is that she drops the keys at some point.
Yeah. So she's not able to go back in. So she has to wake up Tommy to unlock the door while Micah's hoofing it across the street. She gets back in the house. She hits Michael in the neck with a knitting needle. Meanwhile, Loomis found the car and is like patrolling the neighborhood. Oh, dude, we skipped over the moment. Yeah,
get your ass away from there.
That we skipped over when after the dog moment, he has a moment with Brackett, and this is one of those, like, this is the other part that makes the Donald Pleasance of it all. It's what makes it great. Is he has this whole
description of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Jesus
Christ. He just pulls a gun, like some random thing hits the side of the house and he draws a gun and he's like, no, don't worry. I've got a permit. It's fine.
I've got a permit for that.
And then he goes on this whole monologue about Michael's dead eyes and all that stuff, how he tried to help him. Didn't work.
It's one of the best. Well, first of all, the way it's lit and shot is incredible. And I don't know if they had a kick light on Donald Pleasance's eyes, but he's got those like piercing blue eyes.
Yeah.
And you can see the sparkle in the eye. And he's just talking about Michael. And he's like, he's got the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. And I'm looking, I'm like, you look like what you're describing right now.
Yes. Yep.
It's so creepy.
Yeah. It's a great monologue. And so now you have this maniac with a gun patrolling the streets. Like, don't worry.
Yeah.
It's okay. I got this.
Yeah. One maniac with a gun who's saying it's going to be all right. And another maniac with a knife who's saying, I'm going to get you.
I'm going to get you. That's what Laurie's options are right now. So yeah, he's patrolling the streets. And then Michael chases Laurie into a closet. This is another iconic moment where he's trying to get her in the closet. And she ends up using like a hanging rod to like stab him in the face.
Yeah.
And he drops the knife. She uses the knife against him. Laurie sends the kids across, just find help, just go get help. And this is where Loomis sees them running out of the house. He runs in. In the altercation, Laurie briefly takes Michael's mask off his face. And then Loomis shoots the shit out of him. He falls out a back window.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart.
And then we get, I think it's really important. Like when I write stuff, like kind of first lines and last lines are really important. Last lines of the movie. Because the whole movie, Tommy's been worried about the boogeyman. Some kids that were bullying him were like, talking about the boogeyman. And so he brings out
sees Michael, and he's convinced the boogeyman is outside and that he's gonna get him.
Yeah, and of course Laurie's dismissive. He sees Michael with Annie's body walking around. Yeah, and so he's like, "No, Laurie, seriously, this is a problem." And so at the end, Laurie's like, "It was the boogeyman," and Loomis looks back at her and he's like, "As a matter of fact, it was." Those are the last lines of the movie. I think that's great. Although sorry, John Wick is the boogeyman, Baba Yaga, but whatever. And then when Loomis looks out the back window, Michael is gone. Cue the fantastic score. And then we get a final montage of Michael's breathing and locations from throughout the movie. Implication being, it's two things. One,
evil is anywhere.
Evil is anywhere. It's also like a look at like all the stuff that has been impacted by this one event, all these presumably safe spaces that have now been tainted by Michael's presence, which we hear in the breathing. It's a fantastic like ending moment.
It's a we're done here.
Yeah. And truthfully, like, I cannot wait to get into the sequels with you. That said, it's like, this is kind of a perfect ending for this movie. This is kind of perfect. I don't know that you can ever really top this.
No. And I think the thing that makes it work so incredibly well is because we were not at that point yet where we were franchising these movies.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of were though already. Like, look at Psycho. Psycho, by the time we got to the 80s, it had already a few sequels.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that common.
Yeah.
Like, Halloween really was the one. Well, actually, I would say Halloween probably more so than Friday the 13th.
I think since we're doing these chronologically, I think this is where we really break the seal on, because we haven't had any sequels yet. It's Halloween and then Friday the 13th.
Because this comes out in 78. Friday the 13th comes out in 80. Halloween 2 comes out in 81.
And so does Friday the 13th too. 81's really where we break the seal, and it's like, by the way, this is a thing we're doing now.
Yeah. Jason and Michael get sequels. And you're like, oh, damn. All right. It's full steam ahead with these things.
Yep.
But yeah, but I think that because Carpenter and Deborah Hill and everyone, basically, the intention was it to be one movie, beginning, middle, end.
Yep.
And at the end, the ambiguity of Michael Myers is anywhere. He just happened to get away, but who knows where he could be.
Yeah.
Is a kind of perfect way to sum up what the movie is, because in your head, you can play out your own sequel if you want to.
Yeah. Oh, and it's this idea, it's similar to like when you find out that like, Back to the Future, right? That whole ending thing wasn't meant to be sequel bait. It's just like, the adventure continues. This is supposed to leave you with that unsettling. It's just that unsettling, like it's evil. You didn't stop evil. You just, delayed it a little bit or had it move its attention somewhere else.
Right.
It just happens to also work as sequel bait. It just happens to also leave you open to sequels. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that is 1978's Halloween. And I think I guess we got this with Leatherface, because Leatherface comes in with a weapon and a gimmick. He's got people's faces on his face.
Right.
But this is where we get the type of character, like I'm sure there are action figures of Norman Bates at this point, but this is where like you could make an action figure out of Michael Myers. It's something iconic. Yeah. This is a costume. This is something you could wear on Halloween yourself. And I think that's really a sea change for how these movies are perceived. And also, not for nothing, let's see if they have it listed here. The budget was $300. You said it earlier, was $300,000. It made $70 million. $70 million.
Which people, all right, whatever. They're like, no, in 1978, for a movie made for shoelaces, that's a grip of money.
Well, and especially when you compare it to $300,000. So it's like, no wonder we get so many of these things. They don't cost a lot to make, and they make money.
It's like Paranormal Activity, basically.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it is.
Paranormal Activity is actually a perfect, I think, example, because Paranormal Activity is not the first found footage movie. But it is the one that made it like, okay, this is a thing we're doing now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what we get with Halloween.
And I think that's the thing at the end of the day that impresses me so much about this movie, and why I think for me it's such a rewatchable film. Because if I'm being totally honest, I also don't completely consider this movie to be strictly a horror film or a slasher movie, because it is also probably, which we didn't mention, it has the least amount of gore and blood in it.
That's a
literally
very good point.
Almost nothing.
Yeah,
literally nothing. Like we see Judith have blood on her
Yep.
after she gets stabbed.
Yeah.
We see Annie have blood on her when she's laying on the bed with the headstone behind her. But there really is no like blood, gore, and guts in this film at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that sometimes when I pitch the movie to people, I say, well, it is a horror movie by definition, but it also is very much psychological thriller as well. Like it kind of goes back to that Hitchcockian sort of feeling where it's more about the tension and it's more about the suspense of it, because it's a lot of building, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Act 1, building, Act 2, building, and then 3, the bomb goes off.
Yeah.
And it's all about the chaos of what happens at the end of the film. It's not so much that it's like people's eyes and guts are being ripped out of them. It's you're just kind of like waiting for the thing to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love about this movie. And I think that's, again, where the sequels and the reboots and the remakes and the retoolings and, you know, all that stuff, it loses that element, which I don't know also if it loses it because it's just harder to do nowadays, where you go into a horror movie, you kind of expect to see those things. And if they're not there, do you feel cheapened by the experience of the film? Maybe. Yeah. But I think that's the one thing that makes Halloween Lightning in a Bottle is that they didn't need to show anything. Everything is implied. A lot more implication than there is like actually showing stuff. And when they show it, it's effective. Yeah. You know, like when Andy gets killed and he pops up from the back seat. Yeah. It is very effective. And the music plays a huge part in that too. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's what I love about the movie is that it is very simplistic and there's not a ton of character building, but there's enough in the dialogue that you do care about the characters more so than I cared about any of the characters in Texas Chainsaw. Yes. And I would say that Psycho made me care about the characters. And I think, again, it's like Carpenter, subconsciously or not, and Deborah Hill, they knew how to make those characters, how to make you care about them enough that when things happen to them, you feel like there's some kind of a loss. Yeah. And you hope that Loomis gets Michael, but you also are like, well, I don't know about Loomis. It's a little weird. I don't know about Loomis, yeah. But with Laurie, you really, I think the hope is that by the end of the film, you are rooting for her. You're not necessarily going like, yeah, get her. Get that girl in the closet. She deserves to die. Yeah. You're going the opposite direction. Like, no, get in the closet and get away from the guy. Yeah. Pick up his knife and kill him. Quit dropping the damn, knife. Quit dropping the damn knitting needle. Yeah. Get that son of a bitch. But I think that's what works is like you are constantly like rooting for someone and not just experiencing what's happening.
I think that's a really good point because I think that tension and I think the horror of Halloween really comes from this what we've been talking about this whole time, that the Michael representing the unknowable, and that will always be, I mean, if you think about it within the context of the sequels, that's less true. But if you think about it just within the context of this movie, that's still scary. So to that point, I'm not going to spoil this movie because it's not the movie we're talking about. But my wife and I just rewatched Get Out. And there's a sequence where the main character is talking to this woman, this black woman who works as like the housekeeper of this wealthy white couple. You've seen Get Out, right? Yeah. Okay, so you'll know what I'm talking about. And she's talking to him, and she's just like crying. She's talking normal, but she's just like weeping. And once you know when you're first watching it, it's upsetting because you don't know what's happening. And then when you find out, it's still upset because now you know what's happening, and it's still upsetting. Like it's not a jump scare. It's not like a horror moment. But it's terrifying. Like once you know what's happening to these people, you're like, that's awful. And it will always be, no matter how many times I rewatch that movie, the truth of it will always be awful. Watching this, what Michael representing this unknowable, this thing that like, I don't know why he's doing what he's doing. Therefore it's like, I don't know how to like track it. Like Loomis is like, I guess I'm just going to go back to his house and hope that's it. And just walk the streets and hope that I find wherever he's at. You can't like reason with this thing. There's no like discernible motivation. Like you can't, that will never not be creepy. And I do wonder what it would look like to try and recapture that. Like, could you recapture that in sequels where it's less about, this Michael will always be unknowable, but you throw him around different people and how they react to him. That's unique and different. But Michael's always this thing of like, we don't know why. We don't know.
Yeah. It makes me really interested to know what the rights holders are going to do with this character next. Yeah. because
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk about maybe doing a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, like I think cinematically we've kind of burned Michael out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, first of all, I just didn't think Blumhouse needed to make a whole trilogy, but that's a whole
Yes.
other conversation.
Yeah, it is
But-
another conversation
Yeah,
that hopefully we will have someday.
Yeah. But I think trying to move this character into a TV setting would be interesting,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think you're necessarily going to use the TV setting to explore Michael Myers more.
Yeah.
You're going to use it to explore all the characters around him, and like you're saying,
Yeah.
the reaction of having to deal with that character.
Yeah.
But also, it all has to take place technically on one night, because it's called Halloween, and it can't take place on November 1st, because you're like,
Oh, well, listen.
but you also could.
This is my pit. Don't call the show Halloween. Call it Loomis. Have it set during the time of those 15 years where he's trying to treat Michael. And it's basically just like he goes in, talks to this kid, gets nothing. You watch his marriage dissolve. You maybe start seeing him like kill small animals to try and like understand Michael. And you're like, what's going on with this guy? We're just watching his mental degradation. Like he loses his license, but he doesn't tell anybody. So he's still seeing Michael.
Yeah. I'm so curious to see like where they could go with these characters and this whole concept of like what Michael Myers is, you know, like just what is a show look like where the main character is called The Shape.
Yeah. It's similar. I think it's not moving forward, but I know the creator of Brian Fuller creator of Hannibal was working on a Crystal Lake show, and I'm like, what is that gonna be like?
I think, and I could be wrong, but I do think that it was a prequel series that had Pamela Voorhees as the main character.
All right.
I think I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think I know I'm big I'm pushing hard for a Loomis show, because I actually do think I'm not even really joking. I do think there's some mileage there, but I do. It is one of those like you said, I don't know how much you can get out of. I guess we'll find out in this IP era how much we can squeeze. I mean, people love that Chucky show. I will argue Chucky is a different character than Michael or Jason.
Yeah, I agree. Because like Chucky and Freddy Krueger are characters.
Yeah, they like bits.
Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers are like the embodiment of energy and power.
Yeah, they're
Like,
forces
they're
of
not
nature
characters
almost.
necessarily.
Yeah.
They're forces of nature, right? Like the one thing that we will talk about Friday the 13th, but they try to give Jason Voorhees a little bit more of a backstory, but I buy it more in Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Because Halloween just sets up that like Michael Myers is not a man. He's just a being.
Here's the other thing that I think is very specifically an issue with Halloween, and we'll wrap up soon, is that you trying to escape the gravitational pull of John Carpenter and the vision there.
Yeah.
Because I think this might be, I think you can make arguments for like Wes Craven. There's a few you could make arguments for, but John Carpenter is one of the best filmmakers to do one of these slasher movies. And this concept is so elemental that anything you add to it almost detracts from what made this work. Whereas like Chucky, like you said, Chucky's a character, and Jason to a degree, he's not quipping jokes, but to the point where he becomes a rotting super zombie with a hockey mask. Exactly. It's just fun to throw him in different situations and watch what happens there. You do that shit with Michael, it's like, well, no, this isn't what I liked about this character anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference, which I appreciate the difference between all these slashers. But yeah, that is the big difference, especially with like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees is Jason Voorhees, you can almost do anything. Yeah. And it doesn't really break much. Yeah. But with Michael Myers, it's a really fine line to tiptoe the supernatural element, or are you going to just give him too much backstory? Now it's like, well, you took away the thing that made Michael Myers.
Yeah. The other thing you could have done that they, to their credit, they tried to do, and I think Adam and I will disagree on this assertion. I would argue the problem is this movie was bad, was going back to the original anthology concept for Halloween, which they tried to do with Halloween 3. I just think Halloween 3 is not very good. And so that ended up not making, that made the anthology thing less palatable to the people making it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's multiple things. Like, I definitely did not like Halloween 3 as much growing up. I think as I've gone older, I have an appreciation for it. Yeah. Mostly because I can see the DNA of what they were trying to do. And I also think that like it's hard when you have 2 movies called Halloween that are about Michael Myers, and then the third one does a complete bait and switch, and you're like, well, what?
Yeah, I think,
and we're already in the era of Friday the 13th being what it is. It's hard.
Yeah, I think we'll get there, but I think Halloween 3 went a little too far. Conceptually, I'm way on board with the anthology thing. I wouldn't think it went a little too far afield from what people wanted from Halloween. Because it's like a sci-fi, it's almost like a Twilight Zone episode, and it's like, well, you could have done,
absolutely.
You could have done a little. I like the anthology. You could have been a little closer thematically to what Halloween was doing.
Absolutely. But
the masks are dope though.
I will eventually, but like I even think that like you could take the concepts of Halloween 3 and take the concepts of Michael Myers and make them into one show. And
I've had. There's something there. But listen, that's another conversation for another day. Adam,
we can't have this thing be 4 hours long. Folks.
we gotta cut off somewhere. It's gonna be there. Adam, where can the kids find what you're working on?
You can just find me at my name at Adam Hlavik on all social media. I'm also on Heroes Reforged doing reactions every week. And if you follow me on my Instagram and my TikTok, I'm doing a lot of like 90-second videos. I do have one coming out soon, actually, that's going to be about all of the Halloween locations in South Pasadena, because believe it or not, they are literally like a jump. They're like literally blocks from each other.
Yeah.
So check those out.
Again, Carpenter, master of economic filmmaking. You can find me at DJ Talks Trash. If you're watching this, you are at youtube.com/DJ Talks Trash. You can watch shows like this live at patreon.com/onlystupidanswers. Please, if you like this show, I know some people in the comments have been very passionate about this show. Share it. Get the word out. Obviously, Adam and I have made our bread and butter talking about superhero stuff. So let the horror peeps know that this show exists. I would love to keep doing it. I love going through and seeing the trajectory of the genre and how it fits into the cultural zeitgeist of the time. I would like to keep doing it. We're getting to some movies that I've never seen before, and I'm excited to dive into them with Adam. So please, if you like this show, if you want to see more of it, share it, tell people about it, all that jazz. Thank you, everybody that's supporting us. Thank you for everybody that's a patron. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.